In 1974, a biologist named Paul Spitzer stood at the mouth of the Connecticut River and counted the osprey nests. He counted 9. The entire river. 9 nests where there had once been 1,000. What came back over the next 50 years was something nobody saw coming. 1,000 osprey nests. That is what the Connecticut River had in the 1940s. By 1975, there was one. One nest on a 410-mile river. The people watching it held their breath every single day. To understand how that happened, you have to go back 50 years. 50 years before that, the Connecticut River was full of ospreys. From the mouth of the river all the way north through Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire, they nested in the dead trees along every bend. Between New York City and Boston alone, there were an estimated 1,000 active nests in the 1940s. Then a chemical showed up that nobody fully understood yet. DDT entered American farming in the 1940s as a miracle pesticide. Farmers used it on crops. Cities sprayed it on wetlands to kill mosquitoes. It washed into rivers. It settled into the mud at the bottom. Small fish absorbed it. Bigger fish ate the small fish and absorbed even more. Ospreys ate the bigger fish and absorbed more still. By the time DDT reached an osprey, it had worked its way up through an entire food chain. What it did to the birds was devastating. It made the females lay eggs with shells so thin they cracked under the weight of the sitting bird. The eggs never hatched. Along the Connecticut River, active nests dropped from 200 to just 20 in a single decade. More adults were dying every year than chicks were surviving. The population had only one direction to go, and it was not just the ospreys. At its peak in 1959, the United States was spraying 80 million pounds of DDT every single year. Bald eagles crashed. Peregrine falcons crashed. Brown pelicans crashed. 4 species were on the edge of extinction at the same time. One chemical did all of it. By the early 1960s, the Connecticut River had entered a death spiral. By 1974, 9 nests remained. One nest remained at Great Island in Old Lyme, at the very mouth of the river. 1. On a river that runs 410 miles. Paul Spitzer had been watching this happen since the 1960s. He was a graduate student when he started his work at Great Island, and he would spend the next 5 decades studying that stretch of river and what ospreys could tell him about it. His early work helped prove the direct link between DDT and the failing eggs data that fed directly into the case for banning it. In 1972, the federal government banned DDT nationwide. The ban came too late for the ospreys to feel it right away. DDT stays in river sediment for years. It moves slowly through the food chain. The eggs of 1973 were still failing. The eggs of 1974 were still failing. But something was quietly changing in the river, and Spitzer was watching for the moment it would show. The moment came slowly, then all at once. The Connecticut River had one advantage that Spitzer had been tracking for years. At the mouth of the river, where fresh water meets the salt water of Long Island Sound, a fish called menhaden gathered every spring in massive numbers. Menhaden move in thick schools near the surface. They are exactly the right size for an osprey to carry. An osprey hunting over a menhaden school on the Connecticut River is essentially hunting over a supermarket that refills itself every spring. As DDT faded from the river through the late 1970s and the fish began coming back, the ospreys had something that most recovering species never get. A massive, reliable food source waiting right where the last surviving nests were. That one fact, menhaden at the mouth of the Connecticut River, is what Spitzer believes made the recovery happen as fast as it did. But the recovery did not happen on its own. Connecticut wildlife managers, the Audubon Society, and hundreds of volunteers started putting up wooden nesting platform poles set high above the marsh, out of reach of raccoons and other predators. Ospreys will use a flat platform just as readily as the top of a dead tree. In many areas, the birds actually preferred them. Roger Torrey Peterson, the naturalist who lived in Old Lyme at the very mouth of the river, had been building those platforms since the 1960s. Most people know his name from a book. Peterson wrote the field guide that taught America how to identify birds. It sold over 8 million copies. It is credited with launching the entire modern conservation movement in the United States. And the man who did more than almost anyone to make Americans care about birds spent his final years building wooden poles on a dying river, hoping the birds he had taught the country to love would still be there to see. Before the DDT ban, while the eggs were still failing, he and his wife Barbara built dozens of them. The nests failed year after year, but the birds stayed. And when the river finally started to clean up, those birds were exactly where the recovery needed them to be. By the late 1970s, chicks were surviving. Those chicks came back as adults 2 years later and nested near where they had grown up, bringing fresh numbers to a population that had nearly gone silent. From 1977 to 2004, the osprey population in Connecticut grew at 8.6% every single year, for 27 years. By 1998, the state had gone from 9 active nests to over 200. By 2014, when the Connecticut Audubon Society launched a monitoring program called Osprey Nation, the first season's count found 210 nests statewide. Within a decade, that number had tripled. In 2024, Osprey Nation volunteers counted 726 active nests across Connecticut and a record 881 chicks raised in a single season, from one nest at the mouth of the river in 1975 to 726 nests across the state 50 years later. If you are finding this story interesting, hit subscribe. We cover exactly this kind of wildlife comeback every single week. Now back to the river, because the osprey story does not end with the birds. Paul Spitzer has spent decades making one point that almost nobody outside of conservation has heard. The osprey is not just a success story, it is a warning system. Because ospreys eat almost nothing but fish, when 95 to 100% of their diet during nesting season is menhaden, the ospreys are doing well and the river is doing well. When the ospreys start struggling, something has gone wrong in the water below them. They are the first thing in the ecosystem to say so, and right now, what they are saying is not good. The same menhaden that brought the ospreys back are being scooped out of the water up and down the east coast of the United States by commercial fishing boats, ground into fish oil, and turned into feed for fish farms. Here is how big that operation is. Menhaden is the largest fishery by volume on the entire east coast of the United States. Between 300,000 and 400,000 metric tons are pulled out of the water every single year, and almost all of it goes through one processing plant in Reedville, Virginia, where the fish are ground down into oil and meal. The same fish that saved the osprey are processed in one building. In 2025, Osprey Nation counted a drop from 726 active nests to 682. Chicks raised that season fell from 1,077 to 862. In southern New Jersey, researchers recorded a nest failure rate of 58%, the highest ever recorded. Spitzer has been watching this build for years. He has said plainly that the fight over menhaden is now the fight for the osprey. The DDT ban worked. The platforms worked. The birds came back, but a small, oily fish that most people have never heard of may now decide whether they stay. This is where the story becomes about something much bigger than one river in Connecticut. The menhaden is not just osprey food, it is the base of the entire East Coast ocean food chain. Striped bass eat them. Bluefish eat them. Humpback whales eat them. Bald eagles eat them. Take away the menhaden and everything above them starts to collapse. What the Connecticut River proved and what 50 years of data from Paul Spitzer confirmed is that bringing a river back is never a straight line. You remove the poison, the fish return, the birds return, and then a new threat shows up from a direction nobody was watching. And the birds are the first to tell you. 9 nests in 1974. 1 nest at Great Island in 1975. 726 nests in 2024. And now the number is moving back down, and the ospreys, like they always have, are the first ones to say something is wrong. Connecticut didn't just give the ospreys back to America, it gave America a way of reading a river that no machine can replace. Hit subscribe, because the next video is about two wolves who walked into a dead mountain range and built something nobody saw coming.